Hi, Hope. Welcome to the show. It is so nice having you here today.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're kind of like in the middle of this collab, this swap, and it's gonna be awesome. It's really been a pleasure, and I'm so excited to dive into this, and I can't wait for you to share the knowledge and information that you have in sort of the way that we're going to do it, because I feel like this is such a need today. And but before we go into it, though, I want to ask you. How did you get into this space? I feel like I ask everybody this, and I feel like there's always a reason why people get into, going down the road of becoming a practitioner,
Yeah.
talking about health, like really investing in sort of the holistic wellness lifestyle and so forth. So before we get into all things minerals and all of that, why don't you give us a little rundown?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in the wellness space about 20 years ago with my brick and mortar. I have a brick and mortar Pilates studio. And I started teaching Pilates 20 years ago, and then I opened my studio like 14 or so years ago. And when I opened my studio, I wanted to create this kind of one-stop shop. My background is dance, which led me into Pilates. And so I just had this love for movement. And I wanted it to be a place that was, just movement for the joy of movement, not necessarily like hot girl gym. Like you can come as a hot girl if you want, but it's like just let's just move because we love it. We love how it makes us feel. Now it's not necessarily about how it makes us look. And with that, I wanted to provide, everything at one space. We had yoga and we had Pilates and we had HIIT and we have, the mindfulness stuff, meditation. And so I started with just basic nutrition. I wanted to give people just basic nutrition support as a nutrition coach. And the women coming to me were coming with, I was working with mostly women at the time. Well, actually all women at the time. And they came to me, I want to drop 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 15 pounds. It's just very basic, kind of, no judgment here, but just kind of surface level things, which is fine. And like, I help you with that. But when I'm talking to these women, I'm recognizing that what they really need requires deeper conversations than talking about calories or macros. Like there's things going on with your gut and your hormones and your thyroid and all these other things. And so that led me down the path to becoming a functional practitioner because I really wanted to be able to meet them at this deeper level to really help them get to the root cause versus like, oh, let's make some dietary changes and see what happens. So I went down that path to become a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And I think as if any other entrepreneurs or business owners are listening, you understand that your business is also like in tangent. Your business's evolution is also in tandem with your personal evolution. And so as I'm evolving and growing emotionally and spiritually and kind of on my own healing journey. Side story to that, I dealt with gut issues my entire life. I had IBS as a kid and had a ton of colonoscopies and endoscopes and all the things. And so I dealt with IBS for a long time. So I had my own healing journey. And so I'm on this path and recognizing like, oh, there's these deeper like emotional wounds that are playing a part and these physical things that are happening in my body. And so this was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I'm like, okay, I want to help people get to the quote unquote root cause, but the root cause isn't actually a physical root cause, right? The root cause is really this energetic, emotional thing that's happening under the surface. And so this led me down the path to adding other modalities to what I was doing and getting certified in things like NLP and clinical hypnotherapy and somatic work. And so, really helping people at this energetic level, I tie in things like human design so that people can understand the energy, the emotions behind what's happening physically, how it's showing up physically on the body.
I love that so much. And it's really like you and I have talked a lot now off air, and it's really like just points exactly to like what so much of the show is about, is the fact that like we tend to look through the lens of health just being a physical thing. And yes, of course, it's largely physical because we're walking through life in this vessel, that is our body. But in the same breath, I mean, there are so much more, and our body is not isolated from the emotional body, the
Hmm.
spiritual body, our mental experiences, and the things that we are going through. And so all of that, it takes more precedence, I think, than what, because I feel like the body usually follows the
Yep,
experiences. The body
that's
usually
exactly
follows
it.
the mind. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I love that, and I feel like you probably filled a space, as I think we're seeing a lot more people now catch up and start to do the same. But you filled a space back then that probably was lacking in a way. especially like in real time, because I feel like there's a lot of virtual stuff going on,
Yeah.
which is true. I mean, I know that you do that virtually as well,
Yeah.
but I think like when you're in person and you're also with people and going, look, like I get you want to lose 10 pounds, or I get that you're not feeling great in your body, but let's not just talk about the weight. Let's talk about the other weight that you might be carrying, right?
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think you can't. Yeah, and I think the conventional system is really good at compartmentalizing all of that, which is why, I mean, you know this firsthand with your own journey. Like you go to this doctor for this and this doctor for this and this doctor for this, where it's like, okay, well, all that's great, but all these things are connected. And it's, yeah, we got to put all the pieces together.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the body does not operate in isolation, but
Yes.
it's easy for, yeah, our traditional paradigm that we have in this country and in the world. It doesn't serve us largely. And that's why so many people are chronically ill or chronically
Yep.
inflamed or
Right.
chronically depressed, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. So today's episode is largely going to be on minerals. And when we've talked off and on through, the duration of intentionally well on minerals, I feel like I wanted to bring, and I just love that we're going to do this, but I want to sort of bring this comprehensive mini, almost like what was I telling you off air, like fast class on minerals and why they are important. Because I think what's happened, or at least in my experience, what I have noticed through being on social media, talking with people, DMs, guests, etc., is that when people start to hear, well, my minerals are important, or I'm imbalanced, or you need to balance your minerals, that creates a lot of overwhelm with people.
Yeah.
And I think it is because it is a complex issue. It's not just a matter of, oh, you're low in this, so you got to take more. Or you're high in this, so let's not eat the foods that have that mineral in it. And that's not how minerals work. And I think it could be
Right.
very complex, very confusing. So I think you're the perfect person to sort of bring some simplicity to this conversation for just the person that wants an overall understanding without getting into like the crazy nitty gritty. They just want to feel better or they just want to learn more.
Yeah.
And so I want to start out by just give us an idea, a foundational idea of why minerals are so important to look at and to target when overall health, whether you're healthy, whether you're dealing with a chronic condition, and why should the average person care about them?
Yeah. Great question, a great starting point. So I have three foundational labs that I run in my clients with all of them, and then of course there's a gajillion other ones we can add to it, right? One of my foundational labs is the hair tissue and mineral analysis, which is literally sending in some of your hair as a tissue and getting a read on your minerals. So there's a couple dozen different minerals, some toxic elements, heavy metals, and then it looks at the relationships between them. Because, like you said, it's one thing to look at minerals at face value, but it's a whole other thing to see how they're interacting with each other. And I love that this minerals, the HTMA is the only lab that I offer as a standalone lab because it gives such great, valuable data on its own. Of course, I love, like, more data is always better, of course. So, of course, I'd love to put all the other ones together, but it's the only one that I offer as a standalone because of how much data it gives and because minerals are the foundational piece of everything that's happening in your body. So minerals are considered the spark plugs in the body. And you don't have to be a car person to know this. The spark plug, it means that basically every reaction happening in the body requires minerals in some way, shape, or form. Whether they're the catalyst or the cofactor, they're involved. Every hormone, enzyme, neurotransmitter, peptide, protein, like they're all playing some role in all of these things. So when women come to me and they're like, just fix my hormones, just tell me what to fix my hormones. That's great. I'd love to fix your hormones. But hormones are never the starting place. Hormones are just the little messengers. We want to go like 10 layers deeper. Let's see what's going on at a cellular level. And what's going on at a cellular level are your minerals, which is why I love using the HTMA, the mineral analysis, is because it's measuring at a cellular level. So sure, you can go to your doctor, you can get a blood lab and they can check your minerals. And actually, I actually do like kind of putting those together because a lot of my clients will send me their blood labs and I can kind of compare the two and see. But when you're looking at blood labs of your minerals and you're looking at a hair analysis, it's going to give you a completely different picture. Because when you're looking, any blood lab is just a blip in time, right? It's like what's happening right now. I could take the same lab tomorrow and get a completely different result based on what I ate last night, how stressed I was when I woke up, or if I got mad at the dog, like it's going to look different. So with an HTMA, this is what's going on cellularly. And another thing to add to that, not getting too sciencey here, but when a lot of minerals are intracellular, meaning they're supposed to be in your cells. So when you're measuring it from your blood, you're really not getting an accurate look at what's going on in your cells. And I've had clients come to me, they're like, "Oh, I went and my potassium was really elevated in my blood labs. The doctor says I have too much potassium." If your potassium is elevated in your blood, that means your body's not using it. Like this is not bioavailable. So no, we need the potassium. So it's just one example, but we can get a completely different look looking at the blood versus the tissue. But the point is, the minerals, if we really want to know what's going on at this foundational level, the minerals are where we start. And this is always the first part of the protocol. Like whatever protocol I'm helping a client with, we're never addressing the hormones first, not typically addressing anything with the gut. And like unless there's some like major parasite thing we're looking at, we'll do that in conjunction with the minerals. It's always the minerals because you can do all this stuff for your hormones. We can do all the gut stuff. But if your minerals are off, like we have to start with that foundational piece.
Yeah, just to follow that up, and I love it so much. That's a great explanation. But don't you feel like most people that come to you are almost surprised with how you tackle the
The
process?
process. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
100%. Wait,
yeah.
wait, but I thought we were working on my hormones.
Right, exactly. And it's so true because it's almost like the thing that's showing, right? The symptom, the information that the body is giving is never it's never the actual like root in the dirt, right?
Right,
There's
right.
always something that's driving it. And
Hmm.
that information that you're seeing, it's like above ground. So you have to go below. And so I can't tell you how many times not even as a practitioner. I mean, I did actually, I think I mentioned to you off air a while back, but I did go through a school or whatnot to learn about minerals and HTMA and all that. I never went into practice, but I was able and thankful to be able to learn. And it's just so interesting to see how most people that have clients, every client is like, wait, no, though, but my
Yeah.
gut needs the attention. Or, hey,
Right.
like, my menstrual cycle is all whacked out. It's
Yes.
like, okay, well, that's
Yes.
not the place to start. Like, we have to start
Exactly.
somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so true. I, I think too, where I want to go from here is, let's see, before we get into where I want to go, I want to ask you, what are some of the ways, I almost laugh when I say this question, that's why I hesitated, but what are some of the ways that people go out of balance? Like, is there anybody that's walking around that has balanced, HTMAs or balanced
Yeah.
labs? Like, have you ever seen a balanced
Yeah.
HTMA?
That's a really
First
good
of all,
question.
right? So let's start there. Like, have you ever seen it?
Well,
And then what's really driving the imbalance overall? Because we can get into some
yeah.
of the more common things that you see in a minute,
Yeah.
but just in general,
In
like what?
general, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this is multifaceted. And yeah, can't I can't say I've seen like a really balanced HTMA. I've definitely seen some where, we see improvements, which is the goal. Like let's do it again and see improvements. It's always the goal. But here's the thing. Like we live in a very toxic world. Like that's first and foremost, right? So we're walking around being exposed to all kinds of things. So I'd say it's almost impossible to have like a perfectly balanced, mineral panel. But I will say that I think this is probably not like the really big, sexy, exciting answer people want to hear, but I would say stress, right? Just stress is going to be the biggest driver, which I think we all know that. But I can look at someone's HTMA and I can tell you exactly what state your nervous system is in. I can tell you exactly what it's doing. I can tell you exactly the state that your adrenals are in and how stressed you are. So I think stress is the main, right? Just stress in life is the main driver. But of course, too, there are other things. So there are things being exposed to toxins. Like I've had lots of clients that have a lot of heavy metals and toxins show up. And of course, it's going to affect how the minerals are interacting with each other in the body because a lot of them block receptors and, affects how you're able to use them and all that. So that's another thing. But I would say stress and toxicity. And then the other thing I would mention too, which you've probably talked about this plenty of times, but it's just the lack of nutritional density in the food, right? So there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of gaps that we have to fill. And just using magnesium as an example, you can look at the studies. There are lots of studies that show this looking at food from like the 1950s or 60s to today and how much different the nutritional density is. I mean, it's like 40, some say 40 to 50% less nutrient dense which is crazy. So our soil is not nutrient rich anymore. And magnesium is that's a big one that comes from the soil, right? So things like that where, it's just and unless you're growing, you live on a farm and you're growing your own stuff, or you live on a homestead, which is great. But the majority of us don't. And so we're getting it from the grocery store, which it's been sitting there for weeks at a time, unless you're going to the farmer's market, right? That's always a better option. But it's just our conventional ways of living. We're just not getting the super nutrient dense food that we once were. And so it's leading to a lot of holes and deficiencies and imbalances.
Yeah. I like how you said that it is kind of a multi-layered thing. It's not just one thing because,
Yeah, for
the
sure.
nutrition is definitely lacking. And you're right. Most of us are not living on a homestead, and even then, even then there are, uh, I mean, this is a whole other rabbit hole, but even then there are still things, right?
For
Because like
sure.
you have like rain that's coming down that is
Hmm.
not I should say the rain that you want that's really like feeding your crops, right?
Yeah.
You have, there's air pollution, things that are happening from
Right.
the sky. I mean, there's all these, unless you're in some sort of dome or you have greenhouses. I mean, there's even that, right? So
Yeah.
it's like everybody's got something stacked up
Yeah.
against. And I like, you point to stress, which obviously I think is the main driver here. And there are just that is a stress too, because at the end of the day, people are like, oh, well, I don't feel stressed. The body, and you can speak to this for a second. The body doesn't it recognizes stress in a million different ways. So you can
Hmm.
be stressed because you're living in a low grade, toxic situation with maybe
Hmm.
a spouse, or maybe you have issues with your children that are low grade, and you haven't talked to them in 10 years, or maybe you just have a job that is kind of bad, or kind of like taxing on you, or maybe you just haven't slept in a while and you're not looking at that as stress, but it is stress. Or
Yes.
maybe you just maybe it's like a million different ways, a
Yeah.
million different things, so stress can be found in all aspects of life.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to bring up is we all react to stress differently too, right? There are those who can deal with, I mean, and you've seen this, right? And I think you're probably a great example with your own health journey. It's like you could put all of the health things that you have experienced and are experiencing on someone else who would be like on the floor. I can't handle this. So it's different bodies are going to experience and be able to handle things differently. But I agree with you. I think there's different levels, if that's the right word, of stress and there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
And I also think too that a lot of times, because I've had these conversations so many times with clients where they're like, well, I don't feel like I'm stressed. I don't feel like I live a stressful life because your body is really good at adapting. And so you've lived in this high stress, high strung way for so long. It's just your normal. So your nervous system is like that. But then on the inside, you're like, no, I'm fine. But it's because your body's adapted. Our body's and that's, one of the great things that our body is built to do is adapt. But meanwhile, you've got this low grade stress that's driving everything and it's slowing down your metabolism and your thyroid and your hormones. And you're like, why is my period all over the place? Why is my thyroid, right? So I think that's another thing that to keep in mind is that you may not quote unquote feel stressed, but if you've got these signs and symptoms, the signs and symptoms your body is sending you are never wrong. I would just want to say
Never.
that. So if you feel those, there's something going on and your body is adapting to something that you've made your normal.
You brought up such a great point, which is the fact that we are so resilient, and we are so adaptive. And it's just a great, like, as you're speaking just now, I'm nodding my head, for people who are not watching, because I literally just had this conversation with my own practitioner 2 nights ago. And, it's something that I haven't talked about publicly yet, and I will go into it more at some point. But my practitioner said to me, doctor said to me, your body is actually letting you go that it can't take much more. Like,
Mm,
so it's actually like the signs that it's giving you, which I already knew, but to hear it from somebody like such a trusted voice too, like it's time to, really take these certain things that are happening seriously, because your body's saying, I have been in this mode for so long, and I'm
yeah.
doing the best I can with what I have been given. but now I'm going to show you that I can't hang on for much more
Yeah.
in this space. So we've got to
Right.
change something.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, and it's, oh, you're right. You nailed it. It's never wrong. And it's information. These symptoms, we would be dead without the symptoms,
For sure. Yes, we
right?
would.
Yeah. I mean, it would just be like, whoa, like we would have nothing because our
Yep.
bodies wouldn't let us know when
Yep.
there's like smoke before there's the fire, right?
For sure.
So, in your experience, when you're working with people, what are some of the more common imbalances that you see, and why are they common?
hmm I think the most common would start with the macro minerals, right? So we hear macronutrients. There's also macro minerals. So these are the ones that we use the most of, we lose the most of, and we need the most of. And those are the big four. It's calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. So those are probably the four I see imbalanced the most, specifically potassium, magnesium, and sodium. And for all three of those, really, especially magnesium, but really for all three of those, our adrenals use a lot of those specifically. And if we're in a high stress, we're living a high stress life, and we're asking our adrenals to do a lot of work, right? Our adrenals are responsible for our stress hormones, then we're constantly pumping through those minerals. And especially magnesium. I'll probably mention magnesium about 12,000 more times. But we know that magnesium is responsible, depending on what study you look at, anywhere from 400 to 600 different reactions in the body. So basically, almost every reaction in the body, we need magnesium for something. And so, of course, we're going to use the most of that. Like it's going to be depleted really fast. And the majority of us, I think it's in America, it's like over half of Americans are deficient in magnesium. And so magnesium, that's a really easy way to lose magnesium is just from stress and overworked adrenals. Sodium as well, though. Sodium, I have a whole episode about sodium where I got on my soapbox and went on a rant about sodium because it gets a bad rap, right? I think we've gone through phases. Like we had the period of time where carbs got a bad rap, and then there was the fat got the bad rap, and sodium for a long time got a bad rap. But the thing is, our bodies require sodium, and your adrenals use more sodium than any other part of your body. So if you're asking your adrenals to do a lot of work, you're asking your sodium stores to be depleted every day. And a lot of times I've had clients who are dealing with things like headaches and um, like joint pain and just kind of inflammation. And the only thing we shifted first was the sodium. And all of a sudden, oh, my headaches went away. Oh, it's amazing how much sodium helps. So all of your cells have potassium and sodium receptors. Like that's what's helping other things in and out of the cells. And so we need the sodium. The problem is the way it got demonized. The problem is it's where the sodium is coming from, right? If we're getting it from the table salt, it's the equivalent of white sugar, right? Every nutrient's been stripped of it. It's just the sodium chloride. If you were to go to an unrefined salt, it's got 80 to 90 other trace minerals that do their thing when the sodium's getting into your cells. So that's the problem. It's not about the salt. Where the salt is coming from. So setting that aside, the sodium, the magnesium, and then the potassium. Your adrenals use potassium, but your thyroid also uses potassium. I've worked with a lot of thyroid clients, men and women both, that have really sluggish thyroid. Some of them have been diagnosed with things like hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, but some of them just have slow functioning thyroids. And I can tell you as a fact, and I don't like to speak in generalities, but I can tell you as a fact, every single one of them was deficient in potassium. And we wonder why our energy is low, why our metabolism is slow. Your thyroid is responsible for those things. And every one of your cells has thyroid receptors, but we need potassium to help the thyroid hormone get inside your cells. So if we're deficient in potassium, your thyroid hormone, right? We don't have that little helper to get it into the cells. So potassium is a big one. And again, just stress, your adrenals, all of those things. Those are probably the biggest deficiencies or imbalances that I see is with those three minerals.
Yeah, I'd say in my experience too, and just going through, the class that I took for back in 22 and all of that, I mean, that was definitely the focus, I think, was the macro. Is it as simple in your experience? I feel like I already know. I know, I think I know what you're going to say, but is it as simple as just adding things? Or,
Yeah.
how, because you mentioned this earlier, and for those that actually know that it's more about tandem relationships when it comes to these minerals, what can you tell us briefly in terms of like how we incorporate these things? And is it just a matter of eating more salt or incorporating more, potassium or
Yeah.
drinking an adrenal cocktail one or
Yeah.
two times a day? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
how does and does that look different depending on the person?
Yeah. That's such a good question. And I mean, this short answer is no. Like it's not that simple. That's the short answer.
Yeah.
And well, yes, adding an electrolyte, mix to your day, of course, I always recommend that. I love recommending that and it's always helpful, but it's not as simple as that. Because the fact is, like you said, and like I was talking about when I'm looking at the hair tissue mineral analysis, it's one thing to look at the minerals at face value, but it's a whole other thing to look at how they're interacting with each other. And that's really where like the good juicy data comes from. It comes from looking at those ratios and how they're interacting with each other. Because the fact is, yes, I can look at it and see, okay, your magnesium is deficient, your potassium is deficient, your sodium is deficient. And yeah, I could say like, let's just add all these things to your diet, let's add electrolytes. But if we look at other things, for example, copper dysregulation is very common. I work with a lot of women, and that's really common with women for multiple reasons. And well, I'll say this. This is kind of a chicken or egg situation here with the copper because a lot of times if your adrenals are slowing down, you need your adrenals to be able to push out the excess copper. And so, but sometimes too, if women are on things like birth control or IUDs, right, they're being exposed to copper. So that being said, copper dysregulation is really common. Well, if I have copper dysregulation, it's going to affect how my body is absorbing things like magnesium or potassium and some other minerals. Like it's going to compete. So just using that as one example, it's not as simple as, oh, let's just add these things because we also want to see what these other minerals are doing in the body. Things like iodine. I have the my past, let's see, the past four, at least the past four HTMAs I've looked at over the past few months, all of them have had iodine deficiencies. And that's going to affect how other minerals are working, magnesium, selenium, iron, zinc. It really is so much more complex than, and I don't want to make it overcomplicated because then people will throw their hands up like, oh, forget it. I'm not going to do any of it. But it is more complex. Now, yes, is it a great start to add in that good quality sea salt and do your electrolytes? 100%. Like I would recommend everybody do that. But if you really want to go for how do I balance everything out, it takes some more fine tooth comb there.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit more of a detailed approach,
Yeah.
which is I think why it can be so helpful to work with someone.
Yeah.
And again, it's this is not necessarily like, okay, you must work with someone in order to like get ahead. I mean, that's not what we're saying here. It's
Yes.
just that, if you really are struggling, it might be something that you might want to think about, because there is a little bit more to the story besides like, okay, just add in the salt or
Right.
just add in the potassium foods.
Right.
And as you were talking, I was thinking like, oh man, I hesitate to even open this door, but there's a whole relationship too, and there's been so much controversy over it, and I can't even really open the door here because then it would just take up all of our time. But between iron and copper alone,
Yeah.
and there's just like all this controversy about iron and iron overload, and are people as overloaded as some people in the health space proclaim, and then there's the copper toxicity, and there's just like a lot. But iron has such a relationship with copper and all the minerals as well, and how it's sequestered. So and the ways to test it and how it doesn't appropriately show in certain tests versus others. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and again, not to overwhelm people who are listening, but I think that it's important, and you can speak to this a little bit, but it's important to understand that all of these minerals are almost depending on their friends to work
Mm-hmm.
appropriately,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, it's it's not about looking at them in isolation. Because honestly, you can look at uh, the individual minerals on an HTMA, and then you can look at the ratios, and they could tell you two different stories. Because if I were to look at the individual minerals at face value, and for example, your magnesium is super high or your zinc is super high, like logically thinking, you'd be like, oh, like my magnesium is high. It shows that it's high. My zinc is high. Both of those, if it shows high in HMA, it means you're deficient. It means that
Right.
it's pushing it onto your tissue, so it's not bioavailable. So it is about how they're all interacting. It's how they're all working together and not just each one individually, 100%.
Yeah, I think that was One of the weirder things for me when I very first started learning about HTMA was that what you see on paper is actually not the way you read, right? So
Right.
because you're reading like a graph, and when you see a high bar, that doesn't mean
That it's
like
high.
that it's
Yeah.
high,
Yeah.
you know? And so it took some getting used to. And I'm
Yes.
not, believe me when I say I'm outing myself right now, I'm no expert at reading HTMAs because I didn't go further in it. I didn't start working with clients. You know,
Sure.
I have a basis and a foundation, but this is why I have like you guys on, right? So
Yeah.
you guys are the experts here.
That's it.
Yeah, but it is a really unique way to look at the way that the body's responding, and tissues and so forth, because it's like not all is what it seems. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yes, exactly.
Are there any other, just to give you a little bit of an opportunity, are there any other imbalances that you often see before we move forward in terms of like your clients, or just like stuff that kind of sticks out for you, or some maybe like something that maybe flies under the radar that a lot of
Mhm.
people maybe wouldn't even think about?
Yeah, I think, there's some kind of more obscure minerals that I look at that kind of point to other things. And a lot of times like I said, the HTMA is the only test I have as a standalone lab. And sometimes I'll have my clients do it, and then we'll see stuff on there and I'm like, oh, this is kind of giving me and I like some it's giving me an indication that there's some gut stuff going on. So things like manganese, for example, just throwing out a really obscure one. Like this is not one that we talk about very much. But if manganese is low, typically this is showing there's thyroid dysfunction, and it typically will show that there's mitochondria dysfunction, like your mitochondria, the little energy parts of your cells. So now I'm getting an idea of your cellular energy as well as your thyroid. Things like cobalt, for example. Cobalt is kind of connected to B12. And a lot of times, if cobalt is low, this shows that we could have low stomach acid. And a lot of times, this can indicate things like H. pylori, which is an upper GI bacteria. And so I can look at some of these other minerals, and that one is, I would say the cobalt one is pretty common because there's a lot of people that have H. pylori that don't know they have H. pylori. But there's just some more obscure things we can look at that kind of point to other things. And I love a good puzzle. Like I love doing puzzles. So for me, that's what this is. This is like the best puzzle because I'm able to connect the dots and oh, this means this and this is showing this, and we can start to put all the pieces together. I think calcium is I mentioned calcium, I didn't really go into it. Calcium is another one. That calcium is kind of one of those, like you were saying, kind of one of those weird ones where it can kind of throw you off. Um, I've worked high tissue calcium is not a good thing. So when calcium is this is not the same as blood calcium, right? So it's not going to show up on a blood lab the same way most of the time, majority of the time. High tissue calcium is a whole other thing. So if we have high tissue calcium, I've actually have a podcast episode about calcium shell talking about this. But I've had clients before who thought they had things like ADHD, ADD, like memory issues, um, anxiety. I'm trying to think of other things. All of that was due to high tissue calcium. Like I had a client who was going to get, like, this was kind of her last resort working with me. She was going to get on medication, which she really didn't want to do because she had a really high stress job and she was at this high position in her career, high level job. She's like, I got to focus. Like I got to get through the day and I got to do my job. And all we did was balance her minerals. And she had this huge calcium shell, which is her calcium was through the roof. We fixed that and all of a sudden, no more ADD symptoms. So yeah, there's a lot of them that show up pretty commonly that we can attribute to other things. And I don't even know if I answered your question because I
You
went off on
did.
a tangent, but
No, you did. No, you did. I actually love that you brought up calcium too, because I think there's maybe a word that people would recognize, which is if you ever hear someone say, or even a doctor say, I don't know about a conventional doctor, but a practitioner of some kind, or even a health coach say like, well, there's calcification there.
mm-hmm.
Like that's what Hope is referring to, you guys, is calcification. And
Right.
when the calcium is displaced in the body in areas that it's not usable, and it calcifies. And so that calcification, whether it can happen around your heart, it can happen around joints, it can happen in your brain, which can, like she's saying, it could lead to memory issues and other degenerative things. A lot of times you'll see calcification as a lot of times they won't see it because they don't even
Right.
discover it, but it's
hmm
underneath the hood. And I'm sure it probably happens. Oh, I don't even want to know because it's probably just devastatingly sad to think
Yes,
about, right?
yes, yes, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so as we sort of like, turn the corner, I think what I want to ask you, again, sort of this fast class mineral 101 here, is are there, first of all, are there once say someone's working with you, or say someone's like on a journey and they're starting to see progress, what if, how do you sort of get through, or I should say become more resilient through, like, say you're on, say you're feeling better, say your levels are a little bit better, you're kind of like, wow, I've really made some changes, and then potentially something hits in life, right? Like life happens. what what steps, or what can you think of off the top of your head that people could look at or consider or take to avoid going back to the place of severe imbalance?
That's a good question. I think something I always impart on my clients, and me and you talked about this before, is that the healing journey is never a linear journey. I think that's always the perspective I want my clients to have, because I get clients who message me and they're like, they have a week where they're like, oh, this thing went away and now it's come back. And I thought this thing was gone. And so they think like nothing I've done up until this point has made a difference and matters at all, because now it's back to, I'm back to ground zero. But that's not the case. It's up and down on the way up, right? It's like it's up and down on the way up. As long as we're still have that, like it's how you want the stock market to go, right? As long as it's up and down on the way up, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
And this is what the healing journey is like. And so I want to say that first and foremost, because you're gonna have time, like life is gonna life, right? Life is gonna life, and you're gonna experience things, and you're gonna get dysregulated, and your nervous system is going to have to adjust. But here's the thing, the biggest thing for me, it's really, it all comes down to the nervous system and how resilient is your nervous system. How much can your nervous system handle? It's not about, I think when we talk about the nervous system, sometimes we talk about it in a way where it sounds like we're never supposed to get dysregulated and we're always supposed to be, but that's not it, because we're humans. And honestly, what fun would it be if we were just like this all the time? Like it just wouldn't be any fun.
Just so monotone.
So, yeah, exactly.
So like, I mean, that's really like flatlining, right?
Yes,
Like,
right,
yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the point, what you want to work on is the resiliency. It's how quickly can you get back to that homeostasis. It's not getting out of it. It's how quickly can you get back. And so when we're doing a healing journey, and I always, my biggest takeaway I want from my clients is always to just feel empowered in their body and understand how their body works. Like I want to give you the tools, the resources. I want you to understand. Like that's why I go really into depth into the labs, because I want you to really understand what's happening and what's going on, because those are the tools you take with you after. So when life does life, I know, okay, I'm in this really stressful period right now with work or my family or this thing happened or whatever. I know I want to support my adrenals, and these are the minerals I want to do to support my adrenals. I know I want to make sure, my if it's a thyroid client, I know my thyroid is going to take a hit because my adrenals and my thyroid are closely connected. So I want to make sure I'm doing these things, right? So now you understand what's going to take the biggest hit, what we want to be intentional about replenishing when I'm in this stressful phase or stage or whatever. So now you have the tools and the resources, because again, it's just having it. It's like the rubber band analogy, right? That rubber band metaphor. It's like how quickly can you get back to that homeostasis? And, I think it's the adrenals really is typically where I always tell my client, because I mean, that's the biggest source of, or the biggest, it's what's running the show with our stress response, right? Is the adrenals. And so for me, it's like, okay, can we do what we need to do to help with our adrenals? And if they've done the HTMA with me, then they know the things that are more apt to getting imbalanced or deficient. So now I can be intentional. Okay, I know these things were happening in my HTMA. So it's just having the knowledge and the tools, the resources, and understanding your body. I think that's the most important piece, so that you can ride the wave, right? We can ride the wave of life and not, have to crash into the shore, but we can just kind of coast into it.
Yeah. No, it's like, it's such a good perspective shift. And, as you're explaining that, I couldn't help but like think about my own journey and my own circumstances, and, how, and I'm not saying I've done it all right, because there's been a lot of things that I've seen and a lot of dips and a lot of struggle, but I can't imagine if I was going through what I have been going through and I didn't have some of these tools or some of the knowledge and awareness, call it whatever you want, knowledge, wisdom. appropriate tools to be able to support my body, I don't even know if I'd be upright at this point, you know?
Yeah.
And so, as much as there is a lot of struggle, it could be a lot worse. And so, I've been grateful to have some of those things as well, you know, and to look at like, oh, wow, that week, like, you know, for those that follow me on social media, you know, like I had a leak in my house last week. It was like just a bad thing, right? And I'm going straight to like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I'm already walking this insanely crazy journey, and the last thing I need right now is mold. And
Right.
so it was like I just saw, you know, alarm bells like everywhere. And, you know, I also see that that's also my nervous system responding to, oh my gosh, right? Like past experiences, the things I bet, like everything is just so intertwined. And so I thought to myself last week, well, what can I do? Number one, to settle my body down, settle my mind down, settle my body down. And then also, how can I support myself through this process without completely burning out? Because you know, I'm already in a place of taxation, and I don't want to get any further.
Yeah.
So it's really, really true. And I couldn't help but just put myself in that place as you were speaking to it, because it really is. It's absolutely essential. And I think once you learn more about, I loved the point that you made about like educating your clients on how the body is working. Because I always say, when you just do things just because someone tells you to do it, you're not really grasping it
Yeah.
as much as if you actually learn about why you're doing what you're doing and what
Hmm.
your body is, how their processes are going, you know, what your body is capable of, and how your body really wants to heal at the end of the day. It's doing it whether you think it is or not.
Right.
And so empowering yourself with that knowledge, I think, is super, super critical, especially if you have a health condition. I'm sure you probably want to add something to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, that's the most important thing. And well, and I've had so many clients come to me who have tried the things that the Instagram influencer talked about, or this expert or that expert, and it completely backfired. And so I think it's, you know, I don't want to, I'm not trying to fear monger or anything, but I think it can be dangerous for us to just take all of these things out on the internet at face value without having that knowledge. Because it's one thing to be able to try it out because you're like, genuinely like, let's see how this works for my body, but it's because I know my body
Mm.
and I know that this could be a good option for me. I mean, there's different intentions with that kind of thing versus like, oh, let me just try because it worked for these people and this person said it was. It's just having those critical thinking skills along with the knowledge of your body and understanding how your body works because your body is so unique. I mean, we hear about the gut microbiome, and the experts are saying that the gut microbiome is as unique as your fingerprint. So you can't expect the thing that worked for somebody over here to work for you every time because your microbiome, our human experience is different, right? The like we talked about trauma earlier, and all of that is going to affect how your body reacts and responds to things. So we just have to be really intentional and really mindful and about the things we do to our body, and have it come from a grounded place because we know our bodies, and we understand how our bodies are functioning.
Yeah, beautifully said. It really is. It's so it's intention. It needs to be intentional with the thought, or I should say, the foundation of I'm different. You know,
Yeah,
we all have very similar like like the processes are the same, but the way in which our body handles things and experiences, it's just there's no two people alike. You know, and so we have to keep that in mind. Really good
that's
point.
it.
Two last questions for you. My first question is sort of wrapping up here. In your opinion, what do you think are two like super underrated habits or lifestyle shifts that people can make in terms of overall balance? Like just, you know, whether we're talking, because obviously minerals play into this, but like what are almost like stupid underrated things that you think are just like really, really on the top of the list
Yeah,
that you see that potentially are like lacking in people's lives too?
yeah, yeah. Do we want it in just specifically about minerals? Is that
No, you can
what do you
go
have
anywhere you
anything?
want.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can narrow.
Um, let's see. Or how do I want to narrow it down? I would
Mm,
say mineral wise, what's coming to mind. I mean, I mentioned electrolytes earlier, and as we mentioned, like that's not like a cure all fix all, but I do think it's supportive, and that is something that can help. It's such an easy thing to do. Like you just
so
throw it in
easy.
your water.
Yeah.
I think magnesium. Now, my stance on supplements, I'm a fan of supplements, but I'm always food first. So it's never like we're taking supplements, but we're trying to out supplement a bad diet or out supplement a wrecked nervous system, right? That's never the goal. But I do think, as we were talking about before, there are holes and there are deficiencies. And so magnesium is one. I feel like supplements are very personalized, right? This is a very personalized conversation, but I think every human should be supplementing with magnesium. And it's an easy one. Like I give it to my kids, I give it to my husband. Like everybody should be taking it. So I feel like that's an easy one too. Everybody should be supplementing with magnesium. I think that this is, again, this is probably not like the really exciting thing people want to hear, but because stress is the driver of all these things, I think being really intentional with mindfulness practices is really important. And I don't know, it might be cliche. I know we talk about it all the time, but I really do think as much as we hear about it and talk about it, and maybe I say we because me and you, like we live in a bubble, so I hear about it all the time. So maybe listeners don't hear about it all the time. But I really think that it is so undervalued and underestimated the power of just mindfulness. And it looks different for everybody, right? Mindfulness for some people is maybe praying and meditating and journaling. Maybe for some people it's getting outside, maybe it's painting or it's gardening or it's whatever that mindfulness practice is that gets you out of your head and into your body. And I think the biggest, this is going on a tangent, but I think this is related. I think the biggest I can do the word I'm trying to say. The piece that's missing for so many people is how we've become so disconnected from our bodies. And we live in a very mental society, right? Very mental society where it's all about thinking and analyzing and logic and all of that. And it takes us out of our bodies. And our conventional system is set up the same way, right? We've disconnected the mind from the body. We have to go somewhere else to some other practitioner to talk about what's going on up here in our mind and in our right versus what's happening. So we have completely disconnected those two, where you and I, and probably everyone listening knows that you cannot do that. We've talked about that before. And so I think that that is such a driver. I really believe that this is such a driver for chronic disease is because we've become so disconnected. So we were talking about signs and symptoms earlier and how saying they're never wrong, but sometimes we become so disconnected from our body that you don't even speak the language of the body. I call it the language of the body. I'm so disconnected that I don't even know what's happening because I've never taken the time to listen to it. So it's like listening to a foreign language. Like I don't know what it's saying. So all of that to say, and I just to bring it back to what I was saying before, the mindfulness piece I think is such a crucial player in that in helping us to be able to connect back with the body. I think if I really feel like this would be, I don't want to say cure and like speak, but I really feel like this would be we'd have so much less chronic disease if we could all just get back into our bodies and start listening and understanding the language of our bodies. And I think the mindfulness practices and you discovering what that is for you, whatever it does to help you get into your body, that's a huge driver of health.
Oh, I could not. You're right. I think that, it can move. I think what you're saying is that like it can move mountains more than you think. Like more
Yes.
than that, more than we give it credit for,
Yes.
And also
100%.
just to tack onto that really quick before I ask you my last question is this also is super important for people who are super in tune with their bodies. I'm someone, you probably are similar, and I'm someone largely also because of the journey that I've walked
Sure.
who really borders on hypervigilance.
Yes.
And I'm so in tune that it could become actually disastrous.
Hmm.
And so the mindfulness is equally as important, but it's actually to balance that out. And so you are not necessarily concentrating on what's hurting, what's this, what's
Yes.
that, the paranoid kind of complex or
Yes.
the hypochondriac type of the situation that you can find yourself in. Mindfulness is for both kinds of individuals or just anyone in the middle, right? Wouldn't you
Yes.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question. Because again, I put myself in this, I try to put myself in other people's shoes, especially when I think about like when they're listening to episodes and like how they must be feeling. Cause I know that I've had, millions of feelings listening to millions of talks. And so sometimes I like to ask this question, which is if there is someone listening that is really struggling and they love everything that's being spoken and they agree with everything that's being spoken, but they also feel like, yeah, that's great, but I really don't see myself healing in that way because I haven't seen any progress yet. And it seems like things work for everybody else, but they don't necessarily work for me.
Hmm.
What is one thing that comes to mind that you would share with that individual who feels like they're lost in a sense and they want to hope, but they're kind of like circling the drain?
Hmm. Yeah. I completely validate that because I've worked with so many clients in that position, and I know that's a hard place to be where you kind of feel like you're losing hope, but you don't want to lose hope. Like I think for me, I am a firm believer that healing is always possible and that our bodies were created to have everything that it needs to heal. Now, sometimes we need to ask for support, right, to help us kind of tap into those things, and it requires support. But I really do feel like our bodies were designed in a way to be able to have everything we need to heal ourselves. That being said, I don't want that to invalidate anyone's experience, but that being said, I do think that a lot of times when we've said we've tried all the things, we know things, I believe that there's pieces missing, right? There's something you haven't tried before. There's a perspective, different, different, practitioners are going to see things differently. And that's the thing. I know sometimes it's exhausting to have to go to multiple, but there's so many times where practitioners pick up things that other practitioners didn't see. It's a different perspective. It's fresh eyes. Like having fresh eyes, a fresh perspective on things can be so powerful. And then two, I'd say trying things maybe you've never tried before. Like a lot of the modalities I use are quote unquote out there for a lot of people. Things like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and clinical hypnotherapy and human design, these energetic things aren't conventional things people would think, oh, this is going to help me heal. But maybe it's time to think outside of the box, right? Maybe it's trying something that could be so far out there, but you're like, what have I got to lose? So I think it's having that perspective of healing is always available to me. I just need to know where to look, right? I just need to look outside of the box and maybe try something I've never tried before.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I wholeheartedly agree. And like I said, if, well, I was going to say, like I've shared with you in other conversations, I know how it feels to be that person. And sometimes I still find myself there, and need to move through it and move out of that because the reality is that it is possible and change is always possible. And sometimes it just requires a change. Like in order to
Yeah.
see change, that requires a little bit of change. And so you never know who's going to come your way. You never know what door is going to open for you. And you never know, I don't think even you and I mean, people who have been in this industry for a long time, people who are even scientists, people who are studying the body in ways that like are just so intricate. I still don't even think that we've scratched the
Yeah,
surface
I
in
agree.
terms of the magnificence that is our body and what it's
Yeah.
capable of. So
Yeah.
just, I absolutely agree. And hope is literally hope. Hope is possible.
Pun
So
intended.
yeah, pun intended. I appreciate that answer so much. That was beautiful. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about you, your practice? Are you taking clients, social media? Also, tell us about your podcast and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza on Instagram. My website is hopefulandwholesome.com. My podcast is the same name, Hopeful and Wholesome. And yes, I'm always taking new clients. You can message me on Instagram, shoot me an email, or check out my website to get an idea. I am always taking new one-on-one clients, and so if you want to just learn more about what I do, I would suggest going to the podcast first because I've been doing it for a while. So I have over 300 episodes, a lot of great interviews, a lot of really great solo episodes. You can learn about all the things that I do and it all ties into the work that I do. So you can learn more about me there.
Awesome. And as always, you guys, I will put all of this information easy to find in the show notes. And yes, I highly recommend you go check out and subscribe to Hope's podcast. I've listened to several of her episodes, and I only wish that I had known about her podcast earlier, but at least I know
Oh,
about
thank
it
you.
now because I've been
Thank
listening
you.
to it. And she's got a lot of really great and very valuable and tangible, actionable information on there. That's the one thing that I really appreciate about your podcast is that it seems like, I guess the layman's term word would be like doable. Like things are
Yeah.
not super overwhelming, and
Yeah.
I like how you bring different topics and
Thank
subjects
you.
to the table. So
I
yeah,
appreciate
absolutely
that.
go follow her. I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. And that is about it for today. So, again, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for
Thank
sharing all the
you.
knowledge with us. It's been so awesome. I think people are going to
Thank
get a
you.
lot out of this.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
It is really a pleasure. All right, my friends, I will see you on the next episode. Thank you again for joining and have a very, very blessed day.